the Teach Pitch podcast. We are very excited to be launching a series of interviews for Teach Pitch, a global community of tens of thousands of subscribers from over 205 countries who all have a desire to improve the state of education in this world. And for these interviews, we have selected a number of our subscribers who have achieved great things. And by great, I mean amazing. Think of former presidents, entrepreneurs, fashion designers, hospital builders, non-profit founders, authors, journalists, doctors, etc. And what all our guests have in common is that despite their great success, they've encountered many enormous challenges. So what were these challenges and how did they overcome them? That is what we are going to be talking about here. My name is Aldo de Pap and I'm massively looking forward and very grateful you can join us in this journey. So sit back, relax and download the podcast here.
That's why middle school and high school are so difficult for everybody. We stop focusing on learning the content of school and we start focusing on learning how to live in a society. And that's why we graduate high school with very little retention of the information we were taught and such high prioritization of who likes us.
Happy Thursday, everyone. Today is Thursday, March 10th. And I'm very happy to be pushing out a new episode of the Teach Pitch podcast. We live in a crazy world. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that if you go with all the awful news that we've been hearing coming from Ukraine. If you haven't listened to it already, last week we launched an episode, a very short episode, but with loads of show notes listing a number of organizations that you could help. And I would encourage you to look and see if one of these organizations you'd want to support. I'm also very happy to see that there are loads more initiatives out there, a lot more than last week, again, that are trying to make a difference, that are trying to help, that are going to the Polish-Ukraine border and providing supplies. I also hear stories about people going there and joining the Ukrainian army to fight Russia. So loads of things happening there, and I hope and pray literally that it will land on its feet. One of the things I personally wondered over the past week is what are people in Russia hearing about what's going on in Ukraine? And I think that's an interesting perspective because I cannot imagine that if you are someone who works in an international setting, which I guess many people in Russia, or specifically in Moscow, do, work with colleagues from all over the world, that all of a sudden this is kind of an isolation or that you're oblivious to what other people think and see. And actually, there was an interview on CNN. The interviewer Farid Zakaria interviewed a news presenter from TV Rain, and TV Rain was I believe, the only non-state-led news station that was left in Russia. And also they had to close their doors just last week. And this news host said that the people are continuously being exposed to news that NATO wants to attack Russia. And I think that's a very scary, grim, but also fascinating notion that basically the Russians say, well, NATO is going to attack us. So rockets will bombard everything on the Red Square. And so it's very aggressive language that many Russians are hearing. And I just wonder how such news can exist in isolation and also how far away from the truth that is, because NATO has no intention of attacking. NATO only will defend its territories should it be attacked, which I think is a whole different thing. But there's no indication of that they are planning to attack Russia. They'd be crazy. But still interesting that such news flourishes in Russia by obviously those news stations who are asked to submit that propaganda to the people of Russia. I just thought that was an interesting notion and very interesting to hear from someone who thinks and feels differently in Russia and also speaks for many other people who feel the same. So many Russians do not agree what is going on in Ukraine. And therefore, I think an overall condemnation of every single Russian person is way too hard of a punishment. And I hope that people in Russia who think and hear and feel differently will continue to speak up so that an active change can be and will be made. And then to our episode 37, a very interesting interview with a CIA spy. And yes, I did a different voice there because it is as exciting as it sounds, a CIA spy who worked for over a decade for the US Air Force and was then recruited to become a spy and trained as a spy, and then worked as a CIA operative in many countries. It's very interesting to hear his story, how this all came about. It's very interesting also to hear the idea that we have of a CIA spy based on, these great Hollywood thrillers and novels and what have you more, whereby the job of a CIA spy is romanticized, and then hearing it from someone who actually has had the job and a little bit of a reality check there. So I hope you enjoy that. Andrew has led a very interesting life. He's no longer a CIA operative. He left the CIA in 2014. And as of 2016, I believe, he decided to devote his career to train others to also gain spy skills and to apply these skills in their day-to-day lives. And he does that through his company. It's called Everyday Spy. And you can check out the website, everydayspy.com, as well as his podcast, Everyday Espionage. So I would highly recommend for you to do so. Yeah, so I hope you will listen to this particular interview. Little update on the Inverness Half Marathon. So you all know that I'm kind of prepping for a half marathon. I ran 15K just last Saturday, and it went okay. Happy that I could do this distance. Confident, fingers crossed, but confident that I could also do a half marathon. It won't be my best time, I think. Just because of the time that I invested in building up on this. But I do think that, knock on wood, I will be able to finish the half marathon and most importantly, enjoy it. So yeah, that's up next Sunday, March 13th. And very excited about that. And, the reason why I'm sharing this is, of course, because I'm very patronizing. I would like you to exercise as well, because good mental health goes together with a good physique. So make sure you bring it all together. It's just good for you. It doesn't have to be running, but just go outside or do something, or make sure you get physical, not only in your head. That's enough from myself. I sincerely hope you enjoy episode 37, The CIA Spy.
This podcast is brought to you by Mindstone, a platform that lets you build courses curated from the best online content, helping your students learn faster and remember more. Check out mindstone.com and find out how you can get started. We're so happy to be partnering with Hee Ha Ho, an interactive video platform that enables teachers and students to easily create amazing clickable videos for learning. Check out heehaho.com. That's HIHAHO.com for more information and your free starter account. A big thank you to our friends at Zeus Maths Challenger, the only puzzle that effectively boosts your numeracy, critical thinking, and brain power. Go to CZeusPuzzles.com, that is spelled CZEUS puzzles.com, to get your brain buzzing. We are so excited to be working with the team Learning Ladders, the only platform that provides assessment that goes way beyond tracking to effectively support teaching and learning for EYFS, primary, and secondary settings. Go to learningladders.info to find out more.
And a very warm welcome to yet another episode of the Teach Pitch podcast. Today I am very honored and very pleased to have a extremely interesting guest. And I think this guest has had a profession that has been portrayed in so many movies. And, if people hear about what my guest has been doing in a previous professional capacity, then it awakens a lot of people's imagination. And we're going to talk about kind of the hard realities around such a profession. My guest used to be a CIA operative, and you might even want to call him a spy. And his name is Andrew Bustamante. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much, Aldo. And you are correct. We are often called spies, CIA officers, covert CIA operatives. It's all kind of different flavors of the same word. Very well said, sir.
Andrew, thank you so much for making time available to talk to us. I'm just going to open right away with the state of the world today, and then specifically what intelligence means at this moment in time. So, we're now Friday, the 4th of March. Russia has invaded Ukraine. There's a war going on at full throttle. Loads of things are happening, and people are just speculating on the next steps of Russia. So I know you don't have all the answers, but a lot of people are speculating, and they want intelligence, right? They want data. They want to know kind of what is going to be the next step of someone like Putin.
Yeah, I think, Aldo, your point is excellent. The comparison of speculation against intelligence, and it's such a solid point. I often try to teach people the difference between speculation, which is often also called just information. What is the difference between information and intelligence? Because they're not the same thing. Information is just raw numbers. It's opinions, it's ideas, it's stats. That doesn't help anybody, right? I can tell you all day long how many cups of flour you need to use to make an upside down pineapple cake. But that's not actually helpful for you when you go to make the cake, because there's all these other pieces that you need to understand too. Intelligence happens in two different ways. The first way is when you find the recipe to that cake. That is intelligence. It's not just about how much salt and how much sugar and how much flour and how many pineapples to use. It's about how they all work together. That's the secret. That's why you oftentimes hear people talk about a secret sauce or a secret recipe. That recipe is the secret. The recipe is how everything else comes together. That's the intelligence. The other way that intelligence happens is when you can derive useful information, unknown information, from the context of the situation. So to fast forward to right now, instead of talking about cakes, to talk right now about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, intelligence has played a massive role in this conflict, because not only were Western powers, NATO powers in the United States, they were collecting intelligence and sharing intelligence in an unprecedented way. We even saw the U.S. president start to share intelligence with the American people. And you saw a number of reports where, U.S. intelligence agencies, NATO intelligence agencies were releasing intelligence reports saying where the troops were staging on the Russian border, when they expected those troops to attack, how many people, how many tanks, how long the convoys were. This is an effort to share intelligence as what's called a deterrent. When you tell everybody the secret, then it's not a secret anymore. And it takes away Russia's opportunity to have the element of surprise. And that's a huge benefit for NATO powers and for the powers competing against Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's just kind of the magic of intelligence. You can use it to inform, you can use it to dissuade, you can use it to intimidate, or you can keep it secret and use it for your own element of surprise.
But your point is intelligence is effectively a total report. It's a total lay of the land, whereas speculation would be that I know a specific element, like, Putin likes his, morning coffee at, he wants to have it at 10 a.m. Say something like that.
Yeah, speculation is just guessing. But intelligence, like you were saying, intelligence takes multiple forms of information and then synthesizes. That's the key word that we use in our professional world.
Yeah. And I have thousands of questions, of course, on kind of your training as a CIA operative. I just want to, one follow-up question with regards to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. What bits of intelligence do you think are going to be crucial in the days ahead?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So, everybody's wondering what Putin's next step is going to be. And I find it interesting that that's the question on everybody's mind, because if you look at history is one piece of the information pool where intelligence can come from. And then if you also look at the current layout, the current direction of what's known as the global power competition, GPC, the global power competition between Russia, China, and the United States. When you start to put these different pieces together, it's just like when you make a cake. It's just like different pieces of the recipe. When you put them together, you see Russia has no option. It has to win this Ukraine conflict. To lose Ukraine to a resistance force essentially shows that Russia is no longer a competitor to the U.S. or China. So they're all in. If anybody thinks that Ukraine's going to win this, the only way Ukraine wins is if Russia somehow completely and totally collapses. There's no other way for them to win. What Russia's trying to do is get the president, Zelensky, to openly accept Russian terms so that sends a message to all the other former Soviet states that they have no friends in the West. The West will not come to help them. There's no reason for them to try to align with NATO. They need to just make Russia their primary partner for all things economic, military, and cultural exchange. That's essentially rebuilding the USSR. Russia needs that because without all those former Soviet states, Russia can't stand on its own. It doesn't have enough arable land. It doesn't have enough fresh water. It doesn't have enough talented workforce to exist on its own. It needs an economic bloc of trading partners. It needs those former Soviet states. So it makes absolute sense to the informed individual that Russia has no end goal except to win. It's just a question of what does winning look like. I think the intelligence, the information that we're seeing is that what Russia wants this win to look like is they want a puppet government in Ukraine. They still want to let it be called Ukraine. They don't want to turn the entire country into Russia. They want Ukraine to be Ukraine. And then they want those separatist regions that are on the eastern border with Russia to become Russian-controlled regions, just like they did in 2008 when they invaded Georgia. They want the exact same outcome. Because that's how Russia looks strong. That's how Russia looks secure and powerful. The longer it takes Putin to take over a country like Ukraine, the weaker Russia looks. And he doesn't want to take 21 days or 45 days to defeat Ukraine. So the question that everybody should be asking is, how violent and how destructive will Russia get before the end of this? And that's for sure the question that the president of Ukraine is asking himself every day.
Yeah. Goodness me. And we're all, you're being confronted with so many horrific images and so many questions, and I think that's also the effect of social media, because I remembered just having a discussion with my wife when the Berlin Wall fell was in 89, right? So now I'm born in 79. So I was about to become 10 years old. And I remember that, people were celebrating because the wall came down. But what did I know? What did I know about the Cold War or whatever as not even 10-year-old child? And now kind of, as a 42-year-old guy going through this and experiencing this and saying, oh my goodness, the tensions that come along and kind of this entire power play. And I think also the amplification through social media. I mean, you can't look anywhere or you're confronted with something, right? Whether these are micro images of a mother with a child, that are abandoning a father who stays behind to fight, up to Zelensky doing an interview or Putin being demonized. It's like it's everywhere, right? So we're all living it almost. And yeah, I hope that it sounds totally idiotic, but I hope that it'll come to a standstill at some point so that no more human lives are lost, or that, as far as possible. But yeah, I remember being 9 years old because I was born in 1980, and I remember being 9, and I remember watching the wall fall on national television. And I remember looking at it very confused, wondering why it was so important, people climbing on the wall and breaking it into chunks and tearing it down, and everybody was celebrating. It was totally lost on me then. One of the things that we need to remember, especially Aldo, is that you and I can relate to what it was like to be a child that knew of the USSR. Yeah. And inside Ukraine, you have a huge section of the people there that remember what it was like to be part of the USSR. Yeah. And they're deciding now whether they want to continue aligning themselves
with Russian values and Russian economic ideas and Russian cultural and military values, or if they want to create a more westernized Ukraine. And they haven't decided. People don't remember the fact, like, people have been dying in Ukraine for a long time. There's been violence in Ukraine for a long, long time before the invasion started in February.
Yeah.
But now that it's mainstream news, and now that people are looking at it and listening to it, and like you said, they're inundated with information, everybody's talking, but your point was right on. A lot of people are speculating and guessing. They just don't have the foundation in previous information, the foundation in knowledge to be able to anticipate next steps and to make predictions that are helpful for the future. That's where intelligence comes in. That's where, in my business, I try to serve high net worth investors. I try to serve corporate clients. I try to serve even U.S. and allied governments to make helpful predictions based on intelligence. And it changes the way you look at information when you know how.
Yeah. So yeah, you're the founder of everydayspy.com, which is a great website, and you effectively teach people how to become spies, or how to basically use all the tricks of the trade that you've learned to how to apply them. I want to talk a little bit about your journey of getting into this. So if you could walk me through real quick let's go with that 9-year-old in 1989 to becoming a spy. We can fast forward a little.
I'm with you.
How did you get into this?
So it's interesting. I stumbled into espionage, which I think is probably the way that most spies get in. After working at CIA and living undercover and traveling the world, most of my compatriots, most of my fellow peers and colleagues in CIA, we had all just kind of stumbled into it. So I was a brown kid. If you see me on screen, if you watch any of the clips, then you'll see I have brown skin. Growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood in a rural part of the United States, I didn't have any major ambitions outside of just getting out of that rural place and going to college and doing the best that I could do. I found my way into the military, and then the military trained me in foreign language, and the military trained me how to fly aircraft, and the military gave me a very high security clearance and taught me how to handle nuclear missiles. And then eventually I was ready to be done in the military. And as I was transitioning out of the military, that's when CIA found me. And they reached out to me and they offered me an invitation to come have an interview. And they didn't tell me they were CIA. They just said that my background fits a national security type of job in Washington, D.C., and they wanted to know if I was interested. And then, I'm the kind of person that at 27 years old, any opportunity, any adventure was one that I was going to say yes to. So I took an airplane, got up to Washington, D.C., had a couple of interviews, and then before I knew it, I was in the CIA pipeline. And then I just loved every minute of it from there. I met my wife at CIA. I had a fantastic career at CIA. I made some of the best friends that I don't ever get to talk to anymore because they're still undercover. And it was just a fantastic journey that is a high point in my life because it changed my life. What CIA taught me about people and what CIA taught me about how to handle myself in any culture, in any language, in any part of the world, whether I was a professional business person undercover or whether I was a farmer or, any kind of skilled technician, whatever it was, there was a tempo, there was a pattern of life that is common to all human beings. And when I learned that secret recipe, it changed everything about my life. And that's why I love giving that same skill, giving those same secrets now to everyday people through my website, Everyday Spy, so I can change their lives too, if they're willing to listen. But not everybody listens.
No. Why don't they listen?
So one of the core things that we're taught at the agency is that the human brain is kind of like a computer, like a hard drive. So it can be programmed any number of ways. And most of us are accidentally programmed. We're programmed or conditioned by our upbringing. What your parents believe becomes what you believe. The community that you grow up in, you accidentally absorb the values of that community. So you become at the core time of your learning is really between like 2 and 7 years old. When a child is a sponge, you've often heard people say that in the past. What they mean is the brain just absorbs everything. And then from 7 to about 13, the brain starts to normalize and it starts to take all the information and categorize it inside the brain of what you're interested in and what you're not interested in. That's why most people by the age of 11 know they're interested in math and not interested in history, or they're interested in writing but not interested in science. That's what happens up to about 13. So then from 13 to 20 or 13 to 21, that's when you actually start to let yourself stop learning. From 0 to 13, you can't help but learn. The brain just learns.
Yeah.
But from 13 to 20, you learn how to stop learning.
Oh, wow.
And then after 20 to the rest of your life, if you're not taking intentional action, what you're doing is you're simply reinforcing the conditioning, reinforcing the programming you've already had. If you put that in computer terms, it's basically like you're on Windows 98 and you refuse to upgrade. So you just keep using Windows 98 until the system crashes. That is how the human brain works. So CIA teaches you that you can find all those people out there who are running Windows 98, and you can basically trick them, fool them, lie to them into doing anything. And you as an individual always have the ability to upgrade to the next newest operating system.
One of the things that stuck with me, you said 13 to 20. Now, this is junior high all the way to senior high. Like, these are the kind of the pre-university years. How come we stop learning then? What's the biological thinking behind this, you would say?
It's not that you stop learning, it's that you selectively learn. So it's in this is the time frame where puberty starts to set in, and puberty is really just the release of hormones from adrenal glands that are in your brain and in the rest of your body. So with the release of those hormones, it transforms the chemistry inside your brain. And one of the things that it transforms is it allows your brain to start choosing certain avenues of information count. So those hormones have a natural side effect of limiting what information gets retained by the brain in the long-term memory and what information gets ignored. But you're exactly right. And that's why middle school and high school are so difficult for everybody. We stop focusing on learning the content of school, and we start focusing on learning how to live in a society. And that's why we graduate high school with very little retention of the information we were taught and such high prioritization of who likes us and do we get along with the right crowds and are we wearing the right shoes and, what's the popular movie to talk about?
Yeah, social hierarchies and kind of you look for all these things. Yeah, goodness. Yeah, and that's the biggest problem, And then, so tell me what is an example of what you say about, after 20, you either choose to kind of reinforce what you've already learned, so kind of condition yourself, stay in the same Windows program rather than going for a higher operating system. What are tricks to get you out of that? Is it just like your willpower that gets you there, or is it something else? What do we need to use to get us there?
Yeah, so the simplest answer is experimentation. That's really what it is. Routine is the devil. Routine is the death of all good things, which is why the military loves to give you a routine. Because the military doesn't want you to think creatively. The military wants you to get into a pattern and a process of obeying orders. They take away variation, they take away choice, they take away opportunity, and they make everything very rote and very scheduled and very structured. When you build a life around yourself that's extremely structured and repetitive, what you're doing is you're taking away your own opportunity to experiment. If you don't experiment, then you're not giving yourself an opportunity to let new information challenge you. If you always watch the same news or always read the same style of books, or if you only ever wake up to an alarm at 7 a.m., you just don't know what it's like to experience waking up at 5 a.m. or waking up to the sun. Or waking up to a chicken, cock-a-doodle-doodling in the backyard, right? You have to have different experiences to present your brain with new information. Without having the new information, your brain, there's a factor of the brain called neuroplasticity, which is kind of like saying that your brain is flexible. So your brain can flex with new information, just like your muscles can flex with new weights and exercise. If you don't exercise that brain, then the neuroplasticity doesn't stay flexible. It gets rigid. It gets like a piece of meat. If you cook a steak, the beef gets very hard. But if you keep the beef uncooked, it's always very soft and flexible. That's essentially what happens to your brain. You can either cook it by keeping it on the grill and reading the same things and doing the same thing over and over again, or you can keep it fresh and keep it raw by exposing it to new information constantly that's always experimenting with your ideas and your knowledge.
Yeah. But a lot of us professionally, and we're going to talk about the entrepreneurial journey, about your entrepreneurial journey, but a lot of it comes to, at some moments plowing on, right? So there is at a certain point, it's going to get repetitive, right? So I think many of us, the skeptic might say, that's all nice and lovely, Andrew, but I don't really have the choice. I need to go with a routine because I have a 9-to-5 job that I need to finish to pay the bills, right? So where do you see kind of people who need to adopt a routine because they have family lives or professional lives that require some sort of routine? Where can they improvise, or how can they still stay flexible, without letting go of what keeps their world intact?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different levels of routine, right? Just like there's different levels of spicy. There's extremely spicy, and then there's mildly spicy, and everybody has their own different flavor, their palate, their favorite kind of spicy. It's the same way with routine. There's extreme routines where you have your entire day scripted from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. You eat lunch at the same time. 12:30 every day, you eat lunch, right? Yeah. That's extremely scripted, highly rigorous structure. That is routine that is almost inflexible. Yeah. Not many people have to have that kind of life. I understand that there are some that do between 9 to 5, right? Working hours, they have to have something that's structured, or people who suffer from mental illness or some kind of mental issue where the structure gives them a tool to control their anxiety or control their ADHD. In a neurotypical person, a mentally healthy person who does not need that kind of rigor and structure as a tool for medical purposes, they can change, even just changing what time you eat lunch. Some days you eat at 11, some days you eat at 1. Some days you eat alone, some days you eat with other people. Some days you eat lunch with strangers. These are all little things you can do to vary your routine. Maybe you have to work every day from 9 to 5. That's fine. Do you have to wake up at 7? Can you wake up at 5 on some days? Can you wake up at 6:30? When you wake up, do you want to meditate on Mondays and Wednesdays and then exercise on Tuesdays and Thursdays? There's 1,000 ways to experiment so that you're essentially challenging your brain with new experiences and new information inside of a routine that you have to maintain, like you were saying, to pay the bills and to maintain your professional success.
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of French cuisine. And I don't know why, but there's been research done about how the French eat. My wife's French. And so they were trying to find a connection, like, okay, the French, they like their food, right? That the French, they like their cheeses and their butter, real butter, no fake stuff, no margarine or whatever. But yet they're not really known to be very obese, right? What keeps it going is the variety. They never eat the same thing. They always bring together different things. They keep the variety going, which kind of keeps them flexible and healthy in what they eat. So it reminds me of that flexibility. It's kind of, because if you indeed would eat the same thing, a hamburger or something awful each and every single day, naturally you will get obese, or naturally, something will happen that's not good for you. But keeping the variety in there will make sure that you will have a healthy lifestyle, right? So it kind of reminds me in the same way of kind of,
you're exactly right. Yeah. You're exactly right. And it's funny. I think that if you expand on that example, look at the cultures of the world that have the least variety in their diet, and you'll also find that it aligns itself to a physical manifestation of that, right? Your Latin American diet is very heavy on grains and beans and carbohydrates, and you can see weight gain in Latin American countries. In Arab countries, very, very heavily focused on fatty meats and grains. And then, of course, if you're in Khaliji Arab, it's a lot of sugar and a lot of processed goods. And you can see in Khaliji Arabs, very heavy-set people. And then, of course, the United States is the premier example of this, where people will eat the same fast food meal every day. And when you eat that much McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or any fast food, you're just building that repository of fat cells and lipids and sodium, and it just tears down your body. It turns you into a hulking mass instead of a lean, fit machine. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Before we go to your challenges, because I very much would like to get there, I just want to know the time span. So you were 27 when you joined the CIA, and before you were in the Army. So what age did you join the Army?
I was in the U.S. Air Force. I joined the U.S. Air Force at 18 years old. I went to a military school. So I got a scholarship to go to the United States Air Force Academy. And then I graduated from the Air Force Academy at age 22 and was commissioned into the U.S. Air Force as an officer. I spent 5 years with the U.S. Air Force and then joined CIA when I was 27 years old. Met my wife the same year. She was also a covert CIA officer with me. We got married. We traveled the world. We executed operations together. And then in 2012, we found out we were pregnant. And then our son was born in 2013. And that was the next big life change for us. And I think most parents understand exactly what it's like to learn from having a kid.
Every single day. She's 2 years old, my kid now. Every single day I learn from her, and I see myself in there. I see my wife in there. I see herself in there. Her name's Nora. And just, every single day they're absolute mirrors, but yeah, you learn a lot about yourself. And this is almost like a Hollywood script here, Andrew, because I see the kind of the two CIA operatives, well, first of all, falling in love and then, getting a child or getting pregnant. And then, because that's what caused you to leave the CIA, as you say, right?
Yeah, correct. When my son was 1 year old, it's like all parents. You reprioritize everything. And the sexy life of travel and danger, when it was just my wife and I, two grown adults, that was one thing. But now you have this young child, this life that you love unconditionally, that you take, responsibility for. And you ask yourself, what's the life I want to give my child? And I did not want to give my child the kind of life that CIA wanted me to give my child. Yeah. So we had to make a choice. We had to choose, do we give our children our full and undivided attention and effort for the rest of our lives? Or do we give our country our full and undivided attention for the rest of our lives? Yeah. And when I was faced with that question, I chose to give it to my family, to give it to my child and the child that I had a few years later, because that was the kind of man I wanted to be. But there are plenty of heroes still at CIA every day who choose their country over their family, and they live through the struggle. They live through the sacrifice constantly. And I'm very grateful to them for doing it, because their sacrifice is what makes it possible for me not to have to make that sacrifice myself.
I can imagine. And is it okay for you to say, well, I guess it is, but is it okay for you to say that you're a CIA operative and that you've done all those things? Is CIA happy with you doing that, or is there a conflict there?
CIA is always happiest if we don't say anything. But the official answer is that when I left in 2014, I still left undercover. I was forbidden from exposing my true affiliation, my true background, while CIA went through a bureaucratic process of scrubbing my operational history and determining whether or not I should stay undercover for the rest of my life, or whether it was okay for me to claim my CIA affiliation. It took about 2 years, and in 2016, I got a nice little letter in the mail that said that I am free and clear to expose my CIA history and my CIA background, that they would, of course, prefer not to, and then, of course, that I am not at liberty to share any classified information, and I'm still subject to my lifelong secrecy agreement with CIA about specific operations and methods and sources. Okay.
So I won't ask any of those, even though I'm so curious. Yeah. What I will ask is, what is the biggest misconception that people have about being a CIA spy?
The thing that everybody gets wrong, and I blame Hollywood for it, spies are not superhumans. They're not special people that are born super strong, born super smart, born special, and then they get discovered because they're special. That's not how it works. Spies are just normal people. What makes them special is that they were trained by CIA to be special. CIA is a very pragmatic government organization, as are all the elite intelligence services in the world. MI6, Mossad, SVR, the DGSE in France, to go back to your French example. These are all elite units, elite organizations. But they're also very practical. So they don't look for superhumans. They look for people who have knowledge in an area that they need. Maybe they need nuclear engineers. Maybe they need aeronautical engineers. Maybe they need coders, or maybe they need people who are experts in cryptocurrency. Maybe they need teachers, or maybe they need people who are expert psychologists. So then they go find those experts, and then they train those experts to become spies. They don't find people who are spies and then train them to be experts. It's the other way around. That was exactly what happened to me. I was not good at anything. I was a C average student in high school. I barely graduated from the military academy in college, and I did not have a very good military history because I hated shaving my face and I hated shining my shoes. I was not special in any way. But what I had was I spoke Chinese, and I had experience in nuclear weapons from both the Russian and the Iranian angle at a time when nuclear weapons from China, Russia, and Iran were very important. So CIA found my expertise, and they interviewed me, and then they found out that I had the capacity to be trained, and then they trained me. And that was when I found my skill. That was the closest I've ever gotten to being good at something, was when CIA found everything I had already learned and then put another layer on top by training me how to be a spy. It's why I know the stuff works. It's why I've built an entire business teaching people how spies are trained to absorb information, how spies protect themselves, how spies take care of their family, how spies prioritize, how spies run a business. Because I've seen it, I know it works, and I know it works for everyday people because I was an everyday person first.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about everydayspy.com. And first of all, your journey into that. So we're 2014, you stopped. 2016, you get to go ahead. Like, okay, you can share with the world that this is what you've done. When do you start Everyday Spy? When was Everyday Spy born?
It was actually born in 2018, another 2 years after that. I had successfully transitioned out of the CIA and into corporate America as just an entry-level person, right? Just a clerk for all intents and purposes, working in a big company that nobody knew who I was. And as I was doing this job, I was realizing it didn't pay me very much, and I knew that I was smart, much smarter than what my company was challenging me with. I knew that I had more potential than what my company was asking me to do. And it was very frustrating. And I looked to my left and I looked to my right, and I saw everybody in the office felt the same way. They all felt like they were being underused. They all felt like they weren't being challenged. They all felt like they deserved to make more money and have more responsibility because they had more potential. But nobody knew what to do. And the thought occurred to me that CIA trained me how to work my way up in a company when I was working undercover in a company. They trained me how to take advantage of my boss, and they trained me how to find the most exciting opportunities, and they trained me how to very quickly gain the trust and influence inside a corporation so that I would be given positions of increased authority so I could get access to the kind of spy intelligence that I needed. But I wasn't using it in my corporate job. So it didn't make any sense. I think it was because I wasn't a spy anymore, so I wasn't thinking like a spy. But I decided to just, what if I use the same skills that I used undercover? What if I use them now in my everyday job? It's what I did, and then it worked. I very, very quickly climbed up the corporate ladder. I became one of the favorites in the office. I became friends with my boss's boss's boss. And within 2 years, I more than doubled my income, and I became a senior level advisor, at the corporate level. And it was like lightning. Nobody knew what had happened except me. And everybody thought that it was because I was so talented. But I'm telling you, Aldo, I still don't have any talent. I just know how to be a spy. And when I saw that work for me, that's when the light bulb went off in my head that if I could teach other people how to do what I did in their own job, then I would have a business. So that's when Everyday Spy was born.
But you say that the world isn't responsible for valuing you, right? It's our responsibility for knowing how to explain our value to the world.
Exactly right.
I think that's a great thing. Why do some of us, I know I have, as a young, angry man, that I felt I was owed something. Where does that come from? Why do we think that the world should value us? How in our programming, maybe from 13 to 20, where do we get that idea?
So it's less about the programming when you were younger, and it's more about human instincts. So everyone goes through life. Everybody listening right now, everybody who hears my voice, they go through life thinking first and foremost about themselves. Where am I going next? Where did I just come from? What am I going to eat for dinner? Who am I going to talk to? When I call my friend, what am I going to say? That is something we call perception. Perception is how you perceive the world around you. Essentially, the whole world is a movie and you are the star of your own movie. That's human nature. That instinct has stayed with us even though we have evolved as a society much faster. So we still think first and foremost about ourselves. Even when we have children, we think about ourselves before we think about our children. What am I going to eat? When do I want to go to sleep? It's why parents get very frustrated with the kids when the parent wants to do something and the kid's doing something different. CIA helps us to recondition our thinking so that we look at the world through the lens of something called perspective instead of perception. When you gain perspective, you step outside of your body and you start looking at the entire situation. If there's 3 people in a room, you start to ask yourself, what are they thinking right now? What did they do before they came to this meeting? What are they going to do when they go home? What is their relationship like with their wife? What is their relationship like in the office? How do they feel about being overweight? Whatever it might be, you start trying to put yourself into someone else's shoes. I have an ebook where I teach people the very foundations of how to apply espionage in the workplace. And this is a tool that I call consideration. You are considering what life is like from this other person's point of view. Once you start doing that, you gain what's called information superiority over all the other people that you're thinking about, because they are not thinking, what is your life like? But you are thinking, what is their life like? And as you start to collect that additional perspective, you have more information, more data from which to make your assessment and gain your intelligence, just like we were talking about at the beginning, Aldo. You have the intelligence advantage over everybody else because you can think about what their life looks like, what they need, what they want, what frustrates them, and how to fix it. And if you can do that, you can bring value to them when they cannot bring value to you. And value is the ultimate advantage.
It's more than empathy, what you're describing, right? Because it's kind of, because you can be empathic and you can see like, well, this person's got 2 young kids under 3, so might not sleep a lot, but it's more than that, right? It's kind of asking bigger questions.
I call it the operationalization of empathy. It's one thing to feel bad for someone. They've got 3 kids. I can understand why they're tired. The next thing that we should be asking ourselves is, what can I do to make their life easier? Because if I can help this person right now, they will want to reciprocate. They will want to give me something back that helps me. Yeah. Instead, most of us are walking around saying, that guy's tired and he still comes to work tired and he's unreliable and he never answers my emails and I don't even know why he still has a job and they should stop paying him as much as he makes and I deserve his job more than he deserves his job. There's no way you're ever going to get that guy to do something to help you. But if you bring him a cup of coffee and you tell him that you'll take the next report that he doesn't have to write so that he can catch up on some of the backlog of work he has, now all of a sudden that person trusts you and wants to do more for you. That's the operationalization of empathy.
And it's a long game, right? It's first of all not directly tying it back to you, which is what I think a lot of us do too quickly, right? I do you one favor, then right away I want to kind of get something in return. That's not how it works. You are being clever. I mean, you do have a plan, but it's not that you have a direct goal, an immediate goal. It's more like,
correct. It's not manipulative. Correct. Yeah. Right. It's not manipulative. It's more like investing money in the bank. Yeah. You put $100 in the bank today, or you put 100 euros in the bank, but you don't take out 100 euros from the bank tomorrow. Then you have 0 euros. You put 100 euros in today, and then you let it sit for a couple of months. Yeah. And all of a sudden, now you have 103 euros in the bank. Those 3 euros are extra that you didn't have to pay for. Yeah. It's the same way. We actually call it capital in SPY terminology. When you help other people, when you deliver value to other people, you're building something called social capital, just like currency, fiat currency is capital. And you can invest that capital, you can let it grow, you can let it gain value in the other person's account. So then when you do finally ask for a favor, when you finally ask for what you want, you're actually going to ask for something much more valuable than the thing you gave the other person, because you've gained that capital over time.
Yeah. Second challenge, Andrew. Again, you've worded it so beautifully. You talk a lot about momentum, creating momentum. And I think in and of itself, that's such a fascinating word, momentum, because it's kind of, when I hear momentum, I visualize kind of these, the sky opening, clouds, going away, and this blue comes, the sun comes through, and finally there's your moment of glory. And you basically say, there's no, people think that momentum comes from one big burst, like the Big Bang theory of the universe. In reality, momentum is more like a tsunami. I spent the first months in my business looking for a big bang opportunity and never finding it, never building momentum, nor having significant progress. 6 months later, momentum naturally built from having a prolific amount of specialized information available for individuals to consume, purchase, practice, and share. Even now, today, all of my old efforts continue to build momentum and drive towards the future.
Exactly right. Yeah. So, and what I'm saying there, Aldo, is entrepreneurs, we often make the mistake of thinking that everything's going to happen at once. We're going to get discovered. We're going to make a social media post that goes viral, and then everybody's going to know that we exist. Or we're going to build a product, and the product is going to be so excellent that, of course, everybody wants it and everybody needs it and everybody's going to buy it. That's not how the world works, because you have to have momentum on your side. You can have a burst of lightning moment. You can have one viral post. That's a good thing. But if you don't have 5 more posts for people to look at after they see your viral post, then they don't know who you are. You lose the benefit of that lightning in a bottle moment. You lose that opportunity. Instead, we should gamble on the fact that we'll never go viral. You'll never be discovered by any kind of big lightning moment. But if you create something every day, if you have a prolific history of writing, blogging, marketing, advertising, volunteering, doing podcasts, when anybody finds you at any point in that journey, now they have all this back history that they can consume. And that momentum is what takes them from not knowing who you are to then trusting you, buying from you, hiring you, booking you, and sharing you with their closest friends. Yeah. That's the momentum that's so valuable.
Yeah. You remind me of Gary Vee now, who says something similar. Yeah.
With less cuss words.
with less cuss words, yes. I mean, and you're both very right. It's true. You don't curse as much. He curses a lot. That's true. But he's all about, create that content and be consistent and work hard for it. And he sees every moment as an opportunity. Like, he's continuously creating content himself. The one thing I would want to kind of argue here is I think some people don't know necessarily what it is they should create content around. I think now, because I think in your case it's very clear because it's around your life as a CIA spy and trying to build wisdom around, using those skills in everyday life and how to become better for it, which I think is genius. But do you think it's a process finding it, and do you advise anything around that? Because I think a lot of people are looking for, well, what am I going to talk about?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Aldo. So you're right that you should have an idea of the kind of content you want to create. Yeah. But I consider, and what I've discovered in my own existence, is that content is not, think of content kind of like you think of bread or cheese. Content is cheese, but there's 100 different types of cheese. Yeah. Content is bread, but there's 100 different kinds of bread. So some days you might create really educational content that's focused on your specialty. I might create a piece of content one day that's just about Russian dead drops in the Cold War in Moscow. That's very, very niche, one kind of educational content. I'm going to very quickly run out of things to say. Yeah. And the people who are following me are also going to very quickly be bored with my content because there's no diversity. There's no variety. They want to see significant variety that mixes personal with professional. So some days I might talk about my kids. Some days I might talk about my own diet. Some days I'll teach them about history. Some days I'll teach them about current events, like what we just talked about this when we started with the Ukraine and Russia conflict. So content should be varied, but the thing you want to create your content about is really what you believe in. If you're building a business and you believe in your business, every piece of content should just somehow touch on your business. If your business is a child daycare, or if your business is a pet care company, or if your business is teaching people online, you can talk about different learning systems, different learning processes, different kinds of kids. You can talk about what you're learning. What book are you reading when you go to bed at night? What are you doing to educate yourself? You can talk about the thing you just learned today from your 3-year-old daughter. All of that content is super valuable because for the person consuming content, remember, we talked about perception when you're the star of your own story. When you worry about your content, you're stuck in your own perception. When you expand your thinking and you start asking yourself, what is it like to be my audience? So use content as an opportunity to invite them in. Here's why I care about teaching. Here's why I care about Cheerios. Here's why I care about exercise. It's not just about your expertise. It's also about you, your desires, your interests, your fears. Content is a difficult nut to crack until you crack it. And then you just have endless amounts of opportunity to create really interesting content.
I think that's really good wisdom there, and it needs to fit with you. And you're right, people are there because they want to socialize, right? That's why it's called social media. I had in a previous interview, I was talking to a fashion designer, quite a well-known fashion designer. So it's all, his dresses are being worn by people like Celine Dion and Kardashians and I don't know who more. But he was saying that he struggled to a certain extent with social media, because for his profession, it's important because there's a lot of his garments need to be kind of advertised and social media needs to work in the right way. But it's almost like it's taking a life of its own. And we had a short discussion about, well, social media is not the reality. You are the reality, right? So you and your work is the reality. Social media it's not a world. It's a kind of a mosaic of some snippets of you, but it's not a reality in and of itself. So, and I think sometimes that's where, because, a lot of people, they spend so much time there. Sometimes those two get mixed up a little bit. Don't you think? Or what would be your idea there?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would call social media an environment. Just like in your everyday life, you have a workplace. That's one environment in your life. If people only see you in one of those environments, then they'll start to think something about you that isn't true. They'll think that you are always boring and professional because they only see you at work. Or they'll think that you never put on nice clothes and you always, laugh and joke because they see you at home. That's the same thing with social media. If people can only consume your content from social media, that's all they're going to know about you. You have to give them opportunities to engage you in different ways, just like you're doing right now with a podcast. I have a very popular podcast that's a fantastic avenue for people to get to know me and what I believe in, my values. And then YouTube is another excellent avenue. It's not the same thing as social media because you have more time to explain yourself and show people what you care about. Newsletters and face-to-face conversations. The way that you have your homepage set up when people come to your website to learn about your business. These are all different avenues where people can see you in a different environment until eventually they feel like they know you as a person and they want to meet that person because that's who they are in their real life too.
Yeah. 100%. And talking about your podcast, I think you're over 500,000 listeners, are growing. This is maybe tweet I saw a while back, but that's growing very quickly, right? And, for good reasons, if I hear you talking and your vision, your ideas and your history. So talk a little bit about podcast. What's the name?
Yeah, my podcast is called the Everyday Espionage Podcast. It's a little bit of a different style of podcast. I don't do guest interviews very often. I really just, I take it as an opportunity for me to share one practical lesson every podcast about how to use spycraft in your everyday life. I want to give people something that is valuable to them, because like I told you, when you give people things that are valuable, then they want to help you. They want to learn more. They want to be part of what you're building. And I've been very blessed that that skill, that spy skill, continues to serve me. So I can create a podcast that gives people information. And then many of those people go on to visit my website. They give money and buy products. They come out and they train with me in live events. And I've built some fantastic friendships with amazing customers just because they found me through the podcast.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's great to hear. And congrats on doing the podcast and putting it out there and, bringing it all together, on such a level. That's really great. We're going to go to your third challenge, Andrew, which is about energy, how we kind of create certain things, right? So you say your energy should go into creating impact, not high quality. We get bogged down thinking that things have to be professional and look excellent, have high production quality before we can share them or sell them. In reality, impact content is what drives humans to trust, engage, and buy, right? I'm going to pause there. So what do you mean when you say impact?
Yeah. So with impact, basically what I'm saying is that I've discovered that it's more important to deliver impact than it is to deliver quality of production. Let's say you had something was wrong with your car and you went to YouTube and you did a quick YouTube search, right? My car is making a clanking sound when I drive. You're going to have 150,000 videos pop up. If you look at all of the really nice videos and none of them fix the clanking sound in your car, then all those high quality videos had no impact on you. They were nice to watch, but they didn't fix your car. Yeah. Now, let's say you find one video that's grainy and wobbly and the audio is terrible and there's no closed captioning. And maybe the person they barely speak English. Their English is their second language and they speak it poorly, but they are able to help you fix your car.
Yeah.
Which video are you going to prefer?
The grainy nasty.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing is true with all of the content, all of the products. We get so wrapped up as entrepreneurs worrying about what other people will think, just like we're back in middle school. Mm. Instead of focusing on what matters, the education, we're focused on what other people think. And entrepreneurs get stuck in the same mire, the same sticky mud. And as a result, many of us don't ever produce anything because we can't produce it perfectly. We can't produce it beautifully, so we end up just not producing anything. Yeah. Instead, what we need to do is focus on creating high impact videos. Make that nasty, ugly, grainy video that actually fixes somebody's problem. Because when you fix somebody's problem once and they have any other problem, they're going to come to you first. The next thing that goes wrong with your car, you're going to go right to the YouTube channel of the guy with the grainy video. Yeah. You trust that person because they can fix your problem. You have to deliver high impact before you worry about high quality, and never let the quality of something prevent you from producing something that is impactful and meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the substance that matters. So if you've made something which doesn't look as good, but it does offer a solution to something, or it's going to help people, then put it out there. I don't worry too much about if it looks like $1 million, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that there's actually kind of a story and a solution to what you're, the content that you are creating. And that's what matters. And if you have loads of those, then you're
building momentum.
Have that impact. You're building momentum and you're doing something. Thank you so much, Andrew. We're almost at the end of this interview, but before I ask my two last questions that I asked everyone, what's next for Everyday Spy? So you're helping companies, you're helping individuals, you have your podcast. So where are you with Everyday Spy?
Everyday Spy is growing. I've been very fortunate to watch my business double in size every year for the last 3 years, and we have plans to try and double again this year. We are actually working towards taking more of our live events, because it's very hard for people around the world to get to us in where we are in Florida. And there's lots of demand. Some of our biggest audiences are in the UK and in Australia and across Europe and Germany and France and Spain. And we want to be able to serve those customers. So we're actually looking at creating even more video digital content, going and converting all of our live courses into digital courses so that people can take advantage of learning at their own pace and knowing what it's like to learn from us in person through a video interface, and serving my clients. My clients continue to increase in their wealth and their success using our skills, which means that they come back and they become repeat clients. And it's just wonderful to be part of their lives, be part of their businesses as they break their first $100,000 in sales and their first $500,000 in sales, and watching people become millionaires using the skills that you teach them is just a wonderful feeling. So Everyday Spy is growing with no intention of stopping.
Great. Yeah. And we'll be sure to include links to everydayspy.com and the online courses in the show notes of this interview, if you are curious to have a look and to gain the skills that Andrew has been talking about. Last 2 questions, Andrew, and again, I ask these to all my guests. One is around reading, and kind of throughout your turbulent career as an Air Force pilot, and then as a CIA spy, and now as an entrepreneur. Is there one book that you could recommend our listeners, or one medium that you like to read? Doesn't have to be a book. Anything that inspired you?
Yeah, I'll actually, if you don't mind, I'll give you 2. I'll give you one that's specific to anyone who's in business, anyone who's an entrepreneur. And then I'll give you one that really is one of my favorite pieces about the human brain. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in business, you absolutely have to read the book, Thou Shalt Prosper. Thou Shalt Prosper. It's this excellent book written by a rabbi, and it's all about the honor and the integrity of doing business. And I feel like it's such a powerful book because in so much of our world, we demonize business, and we think business people are crooks and thieves and sneaky, when in fact that's not what business is. So it's excellent if you're in business to read Thou Shalt Prosper. And then if you're not in business, or if you're just interested in how the human brain works, another one of my favorite books is a book called Outliers. And I think Outliers was written by Malcolm Gladwell back in the early or mid 2000s. And it's just a fantastic book that talks about people outside of the bell curve. And when you look at those people, what you can learn about how wrong averages can be. And it's just a fascinating business people. I think very successful business people are all people who land outside of the bell curve. So if you want to be like those people, there's no better place to learn than from the examples of people who live as outliers.
Wonderful. And then the very last question. So you have a podcast, but you say you don't entertain guests, but now you can entertain guests, and actually you can invite your very number one favorite guest ever in the world. Who would that be?
Does it have to be alive, or can he be from history? Can he be real or fake?
It's so funny. Everyone always asks, does it usually have to be alive? No, it can be a seance. It can be someone who passed. It can even be someone fictional. Never had that one, but if you feel the need, go ahead. Yeah.
So the person I would want to interview is actually my great-great-grandson. I want to have a chance to interview the son of my son's son so that I can understand if I did it right. I want to know, where was I a good father? Where was I a good role model? What values do I carry with me now that survive the next 3 generations? And I'm never going to meet that person, right? Biologically, I'm never going to meet my great-great-grandson in any kind of meaningful conversation.
Yeah.
And I've often let myself daydream about how amazing it would be to have just 1 hour to sit on a park bench with the 12-year-old great-great-grandson that I'll never get to meet, just to see what kind of person he turns out to be.
Okay, this is by far the most beautiful guest ever, kind of the guest suggestion that we've had on our show thus far. You've just, knocked it out of the park. That is amazing. That's amazing. And just so I understand it correctly, you say great grandson because you are 100% sure you will never talk to him, right? So it's because you could also say like your great grandson, but there might be a chance that you will get to see him. Right? I hope for you, but great grandson's going to be a bit of a tall order. So
and even if I am very old and my great grandson is very young and I get to hold him, that would be magical. But it's the conversation. What it's like to have conversations with children. They're so honest and they're so open, and to have that conversation, with a child somewhere between 9 and 12 years old when they have a very advanced vocabulary but they have not yet started to be conditioned by the world around them heavily. Those are just such amazing years to talk to kids and learn from them.
Yeah. Wonderful. I get shivers all over. That's amazing. That's very, very, very well put. Thank you so much, Andrew. I have a third question for you that just came to mind.
Of course.
What's your favorite spy movie?
Oh, so I will caveat this by saying that all spy movies it's like doctors watching doctor movies for me. It's too hard.
Yeah, but you can watch them.
But I will say that I absolutely love Johnny English movies. Anything where they take and they make comical issues out of spy issues, I think is just genius. I've always loved the show Archer. And I love those get smart kind of movies because espionage is very boring until it's very, very funny. But nobody ever gets to see that in a James Bond movie, how funny espionage can really be. So thank goodness for Get Smart and Johnny English.
Okay. Very good answers. Andrew, thank you so much for this interview. I wish you all the very, very best with Everyday Spy. It was a real pleasure talking to you. Come back anytime. We would really like to hear from you in a couple of months' time to see how you fared and if you're doing well with online course. If you want to know more about Andrew, go to everydayspy.com, and we'll be sure to include links also to his online courses in our show notes. Andrew Bustamante, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aldo.
If you liked this episode of the Teach Pitch podcast, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod for our beautiful theme music, Le Grand Chase. This podcast was produced and edited by Natalie Piles. Project coordination by Inva Cheney.